Arguably the greatest movie about paranoia and conspiracies in a paranoia and conspiracy filled era. It's 1974's The Conversation, directed by Francis Ford Coppola, starring Gene Hackman. Here's why I absolutely love this movie, coming up next. Coppola directed The Conversation right after The Godfather, and this is one of the great director stretch runs ever. The Godfather, The Conversation, Godfather Part 2, Apocalypse Now. That was Coppola's 1970s run. Now, those other three films, The Godfather's, Apocalypse Now, are pretty popular and famous all over the internet amongst particularly males in my experience, but The Conversation might be the greatest movie of all. Now, that would be controversial to argue because who could top The Godfathers? But this is an absolutely great movie in so many ways. Everything makes this movie great. Gene Hackman's performance, the other acting in it, cinematography is absolutely great. So many fabulous shots in this movie. The score is wonderful. Great jazz piano score here. Walter Murch did the sound and the sound design, which is crucial to the plot. And it's absolutely a magical soundscape to this movie. Wear headphones or get a great set of speakers to listen to this. So everything comes together in a noir detective fiction sort of world that I absolutely love. The movie is kind of in a new breed of detective movies. You got Chinatown, you got Night Moves by Arthur Penn. I found these early 1970s movies kind of develop and change what came before them in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And so here you have a movie that's about a detective who actually is not so great at detecting. In fact, he's probably just part detective. Harry Caul is a surveillance man recording things for clients, and he's the best in the world, or one of the best. He's an acknowledged master in the field of surveillance, but there's also some shady things going on because surveillance, there's another word for it called wiretapping. If you call it wiretapping, it's illegal. But surveillance is recording anything and anybody in any place using microphones, cameras, and so on. The wonderful opening shot shows us, in fact, a surveillance camera of a sort where we find out later that it is a camera. It actually looks like a sniper's rifle. So the relationship between cameras and guns comes up immediately in this movie, which I think has to do with some of the paranoia and conspiracies, the assassination string of assassinations in the 1960s, which is just awful. But the idea that everyone's being watched, targeted, recorded, and so on is a fairly new phenomenon in society and still with us today. Now it's time to spoil everything because we have to talk about, I have to in this video, the last final 15 minutes or so with some controversial, very infamous shots, very interesting, fabulous open-ended ending. So go watch the movie if you haven't seen it, and then come back to the video if you don't want things spoiled. Let's talk about the main character, Gene Hackman's wonderful performance as Harry Caul, who is an isolated man by trade. He has to guard his secrets because he's adapted and modified some of his equipment. He doesn't want his competition stealing it, as we find out later in the movie. But he's also a very private man who doesn't talk to anybody and tell anybody the secrets. He's got a kept girlfriend played by Terry Garr. She wants to know more about him. She wants to maybe fall in love with him. He's so distant from her, he doesn't give her any secrets and gets madder. It's very short-tempered when it comes to information about himself. He breaks his relationship with his partner Stan, or his worker Stan, played by John Cazale. And we find out he's just alone and isolated. He's very paranoid. He puts extra locks on his doors. He's very alarmed when there's a gift inside his door of his apartment. And he calls up his landlady, and he thinks he has the only set of keys to his doors. I think because he works in security and surveillance, he knows so much about how people are recorded and all the methods and the diversity of equipment there is. He himself is paranoid that he's being watched, recorded, and targeted. And that reflects in his own life. The movie shows us his empty spaces in his life, his empty warehouse, which he owns. Well, I think it's a kind of cool workspace, but he only uses like a very small portion of it, whereas the rest of it is empty and open, which may be a metaphor not only for the open-endedness of this movie, the variety of interpretations, but for the emptiness of his life. There's nothing to fill up his life. Friends, lovers, family. Where are any of these people at? They're not there, and he drives so many of them away. Now, actually, because he doesn't have close friends, family members, and a lover he himself trusts, I think that makes him vulnerable because he knows he needs it. in the moments of vulnerability when he opens up actually could get him trapped if people are coming after him, which is what happens in the movie. Anyway, the beginning and the opening is really very important, so pay close attention. He records a conversation in an elaborate way between two people who seem to be having an affair. He needs to capture the fact that they're having an affair for his client, named the director. This mysterious client of the director seems to be a powerful person, and his minion, played here by Harrison Ford in an early role, and he's sort of a nefarious character. It was really interesting. Call isn't sure who the director is or what the director's up to. He's just going to record this couple, but when he does, he gets worried that his client will do something to this couple or to, the man or woman who are having the affair and having the affair against the client. Now, apparently in Harry Call's life, we don't get much information about this. This has happened before, where he has recorded something, giving it to a client, and then people have been hurt as a result of his data collection. He feels a lot of moral guilt, a very serious weight of guilt on him because of that, and then he puts that onto this case, in which he discovers that in the conversation, very hard to hear section, where the two people say that they will get killed if they're found out.
Kill us if you got the chance.
Now, it's an interesting line in English in terms of the idiom, because he would kill us if he found out may be literal. That's how the Harry Caul character kind of takes it. That's one of his interpretations of it. Maybe they will die if I turn in the tapes to my client, the director. But of course, the idiom in English can be more innocuous. People say he's going to kill me as an exaggeration, as I'm going to be harmed, or he's going to hate me, or he's going to get mad at me. That's what he's going to kill me could mean. So there's a more innocuous and a more innocent interpretation of that line, but Caul dismisses that. He goes with the hard interpretation that these people will get killed if he turns in the tapes. Thus, there's a moral dimension he finds to surveillance work. He's becoming a more moral person as this movie goes along, which actually may end up getting him trapped. Some of his early lines in the movie include saying, "I don't care what my clients or these people on the tape are talking about." Well, that ends up not being true as the movie goes along. Another line, he says, "I don't need anyone in this movie. I don't need anyone to love me or be with me," but that's not true as well, as we see later in the movie. The open-endedness of this movie is just delightful because the conversation itself, which seems innocuous and dull and full of meaningless prattle between two lovers, that conversation actually could mean more than we think it means. One of the interpretations is it's meaningless, it's next to nothing. But then later in the movie, as it's replayed over and over for us, and as Harry Caul plays it over and over again, the conversation, what they're saying seems to be about him, his own life, problems in his own life, and so on. And of course, this is a spoiler late in the movie. What we thought the conversation was about, what's the exact opposite? It's inverted. And supposedly, now this is Harry Caul's view of the world, the three people involved in this conversation are in a conspiracy to kill the director, played by Robert Duvall. One question this movie asks is Harry Caul's view that this is a conspiracy, he stumbled into one, that the director has died at the hands of these three people. Is that reasonable or not? And here you get one of the most famous or infamous shots, I think, in movie history, where the toilet bubbles up with blood in it. And the question is what we're seeing real, or is it imagined? You can actually go with both interpretations, and they take you down two wildly different roads with two wildly different ways to look at this movie. One is that Harry Caul's view is right. This is a conspiracy. He stumbled into it, and he needs to be paranoid and delusional because there is a conspiracy not only out to get him, but to get the director. Now they're watching him. Anything in the world can watch him, and we too need to be warned that anything could record us and target us. I actually prefer another way to look at this movie. I think the toilet scene and the number of other scenes in the last 15 minutes, these shots of blood and such, I think they're Harry Caul's paranoid delusions. One thing about this character, he's so paranoid, he doesn't let anybody into his life. He's worried that someone is going to watch him, target him, to steal his, secret information, to steal his not only his private information, but how he goes about being a master surveiller. And so to me, his paranoid delusions, his high level of paranoia, coupled with his moral guilt from past actions, kind of come together and make him believe and think that everybody involved in this case is trying to kill the director and is out to get him too.
Hello.
We know
Yes, yeah, I think at the end when the Harrison Ford character calls him up on the phone at his house or his apartment and says, "We're watching you," I'm not sure that that's actually real, or that's at least one plausible way to view the movie, in my view. If that's the case, and this movie is about, I think, that there's too much paranoia in modern life, there's too much conspiracy theorizing, that all these movies, Parallax View, Chinatown, and The Manchurian Candidate, and on, there's too much of this, and we got to get rid of this because it's driving us crazy. Literally, the Gene Hackman character strips his whole apartment at the end of the movie, and the last shot indicates a camera watching him. It looks like a surveillance camera in the last shot. Well, I think this movie may say that there's too much of this going on if you take my point of view. But if Harry Caul in the toilet and what he thinks happens to the director, that the director's killed, really is real, then there's a paranoid conspiracy at the heart of this film, and he has been set up. The conversation is been scripted perhaps, and the two people who are being recorded at the beginning of the movie know that it's happening to them. Now all of this in the movie means that here we're in the early years of knowing that everything could be recorded with microphones and cameras possibly everywhere, hidden in pins, hidden in walls and telephones and so on, or telephone conversations recorded. This, after the last 50 years, almost 50 years, this movie is 48 years old as of this recording. This is still an issue in modern society. People may not care as much, but this movie could be made and modified today with similar kind of paranoia involved. And there are gigantic moral questions asked of the surveillance person here, Harry Caul, everybody else in the movie. I love it when he goes to the Catholic confessional, and wonderful shot that changes focuses where you see him and then you see the priest behind the screen, but just blocked off or walled off by the screen. And you know that the Harry Caul character has not confessed all of his sins. In fact, is surveillance itself a sin? To be a surveiller or a wiretapper, or whatever you want to call him, is that a sin? Now, what do you think of the conversation? What do you think of this video? Anything I said and other things you want to add, please leave that in the comments. Thank you so much. And subscribe to this channel for more great content. Have a great day.